Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Regional Digital Government Summit track. We're here live with our third session, and we just want to give you a recap. So this morning in session one, we heard from Krista, Nikhil, and Annie, really talking about moving beyond digital service units and really thinking about what are the levers to create the conditions for lasting digital transformation, thinking about in the context of maturing organizations. Then we had session two where we had Clara and Bridget who kind of brought it down to a pragmatic level and really talked about the importance of user research and content design and really putting users first and how these are becoming core pillars in service delivery. And finally, today we want to go deep with a region. And our region this afternoon is Saskatchewan. We're going to learn about Saskatchewan's digital identity journey. Really, what is going on in Saskatchewan? As the sixth most populous province in Canada, how is the province adopting practices of digital inclusion and equity as it continues on its journey to building a digital ecosystem and really improving the way it delivers government services for all citizens across the province? So we're going to hear from two people. We're going to hear from Cosanna. Preston-Idedia has worked in Canada, the UK, and Nigeria, and has a wealth of experience in developing and leading transformational digital, organizational, and communications strategies. Her experience ranges across government, nonprofits, and the private sector, including multinationals like Coca-Cola, PwC, Procter & Gamble, HP, and Pfizer. Her current work in digital strategy with the government of Saskatchewan focuses on driving digital transformation, specifically through digital identity. Cosanna holds a master's degree from Oxford University and a BA honors from the University of Alberta. And she remains deeply committed to developing and welcoming inclusive communities. And she will be joined by Ola. Ola is a certified and results-driven professional. He has worked in Canada, UK, and Nigeria, has a wealth of experience and diverse background in financial services, e-commerce, customer relations, and consulting domains, focusing on digital transformation and the public sector. His current role as the lead business analyst in the digital identity program of the government of Saskatchewan focuses on driving digital transformation and enhancing a digital economy for the province, specifically through DI. He holds a master's degree in business administration, MBA from Edinburgh Business School, Scotland, and a Bachelor of Science in Economics from University in Nigeria, whose first name I cannot pronounce at the moment correctly, so I'm not going to butcher it. He is a certified member of International Institute of Business Analysis and an agile practitioner. His interests are in inclusion, using digital technology, and innovations. Ola and Cosanna, over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Cosanna Preston-Idedia. I'm the Director of Digital Identity with the Government of Saskatchewan. And we have my colleague as well, Ola Daniels, who's our Senior Business Analyst for Digital Identity as well with the Government of Saskatchewan. And so today we do want to speak with you about how we are delivering citizen-centered services, specifically digital identity in Saskatchewan. And we'll talk a little bit, quite a bit actually, about our stakeholder engagement findings that we've developed over the last year and a half. But before we get into that, we want to talk to you a bit about what digital identity is to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'm going to show you this video, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that we've taken to get here, starting way back in 2013. Then we'll go into our stakeholder engagement findings, and we'll conclude with a review of the key takeaways for designing digital identity, but also digital services as a whole.
Sometimes applying for government benefits can be a lengthy and complicated process. The Government of Canada's vision is to enable Canadians to use trusted digital identities for quick and easy access to online services. Emily's having a baby soon and is applying for benefits. Today, she has to complete an online application form, then wait 5 to 10 days for an access code. When it arrives in the mail, she will use it to create an account and set up direct deposit. What if she could do all this at once from any device? She'd confirm who she is using her provincial or territorial trusted digital ID, consent to using personal information from her digital ID, and may choose to receive notifications. Once approved, she'd decide how to get paid. That's it. The government's goal is to enable simple, fast, and convenient access to services anytime, anywhere, on any device. We're working with government and the private sector to build the foundation and standards for digital identity across Canada and internationally. The future is closer than you think.
Okay, so starting back off where this journey began, the Digital Strategy and Operations Office in Saskatchewan was created in 2013. And when we got started, and this was before my time, it was a really different world from what it is today. So significant legacy applications, expensive service channels. We had 11% satisfaction on gov.sk.ca, which was our main website, but we actually had 70 plus websites across government. So you can imagine, of course, these government websites are ministry focused or program focused or department focused. And so the reality of that is you have to know what ministry to go to for a service. It's not that you just know what service you need to know who provides that service. On top of that, of course, multiple websites means multiple usernames and passwords. So we had a really siloed, fragmented experience back in 2013. And it showed, right? And so what we've done, our first step as the Digital Strategy and Operations Office, was to consolidate our predominant digital footprint, which is, of course, the government website. And so we shifted those 70 plus websites to one, Saskatchewan.ca. And as we did that, we've over the time have grown our citizen satisfaction. Yes, we're now plateauing a little bit. And you can see 64%, but anyone who works in this business knows the goal is not 100%. You won't get there. The goal is sort of, mid to high 60s, mid 70s, somewhere in there. So we're hoping to see that continue to creep up over the next couple of years. What really tells the story, though, of this journey is the word clouds at the bottom. So we start on the far left with frustrating, front and center. And as you move to the right, you get relevant and comprehensive, accessible, easy to use, and accessible again is standing out in our last one. So that was really the first step. What it did was set the tone for digital, that we need everything in one spot. And it also set the tone for citizen experience, that we have to prioritize usability. And so we built on that. The next step in the digital strategy journey was building a single place, if you remember all those multiple passwords, a single place to log in and access your government services. And so that's where we are today with our transactions. We have what we call Saskatchewan account, and we are increasingly getting more and more of those paper-based services or old services that have their own username and password behind the Saskatchewan account system. But we still have a problem here. We still need to know which service to go to. So let's take an example like a business. If you are trying to set up a small business in Saskatchewan, you need to know which permits to go for and then to click on all of those permits to apply for them. There's nothing pulling you all together. There are places that list the different permits that you might need, but there isn't that seamless experience that walks you through step by step how you can set up that business. And that's that seamless journey that we're getting to. To get to that seamless journey, we need our website in one spot. We need Saskatchewan account, all services behind one spot. But we also need a third thing, and that allows us to put sensitive services online, and that's digital identity, which is what we're here to talk about today. Digital identity allows us to provide more highly sensitive services or high value services online. But as we're shifting into this digital identity problem, we're also starting to reach maturity with our existing products, which is a fantastic place to be shifting out of that startup realm and into a place where our teams are mature, our technology is mature, our teams have grown with it. We now support Saskatchewan.ca, Saskatchewan account, and social media under that whole umbrella of digital strategy and operations. But as everyone here would probably know well, an operations team doesn't have a lot of time and space to do forward-thinking strategic initiatives because they're busy in the day-to-day operations as they should be. And so we were at a dilemma. We've now got this momentum, we've got this pace going with our technology, but we didn't have a team that could break out of the operations chunk and actually focus on strategy. And we knew this was going to be important in the digital ID context. There were three core challenges that we knew made digital ID more complicated, perhaps, than previous tools and requiring more attention. Number one, especially in this era of fake news, were all the myths around digital identity, that it was going to be Big Brother, that government was going to be tracking and holding our data and watching everywhere, that every move that someone was going to make. This is explicitly not the intention in Canadian digital identity. but it is definitely a public fear. And so we knew we were going to have to do lots of awareness and education building to start to overcome that, but also understand where the concerns were coming from so that we could work with our population to find a solution that addresses those concerns. Speaking of concerns, the second thing that we knew we had to work with was facial verification or facial recognition. Again, what does it allow us to do? It proves that the person behind the computer is truly who they say they are. So we can offer those high value, highly sensitive services without somebody having to physically come in, show their ID, or in the video, as it showed you, wait for that mailed out PIN. Facial verification replaces the mailed out PIN, but it comes with concerns again, right? So in this case, facial verification is often associated with policing, where someone takes a photo of a person committing a potential crime using a CCTV camera, and then that photo is run against a database of people to try and identify an actual person. Now, the problem with that is that if you get a false positive, you can get the wrong person ending up being put through the justice system, all because of facial verification. And we know that facial verification is more likely to result in a false positive the darker your skin tone is or the more female you are. So again, very valid concerns about facial verification, but the context that digital ID uses facial verification is very different. So it's a one-to-one concept, whereas that policing context is a one-to-many. In this case, we're taking the photo of, let's say, myself, and I would input my driver's license number, and then my photo and my driver's license number go off to the driver's license database, and we ask the driver's license database to pull up the record, the one record that's associated with that number, and there's a picture on that file, right? And then we're able to match my picture against my picture. So the chances of a false positive are significantly reduced, and the implications of a false positive too become far less limited, although it does still result in a breach. So not something we want to discount, but we can guard against these. Concerns. So again, we knew from a convenience perspective and from a security perspective, facial recognition is key to offering services fully online and avoiding that delay in accessing service. But we also know it comes with risks, and so we need to be able to work with those risks. The last piece is devices, and Olad's going to talk more about this as well. But when we think about devices, you probably have heard many people saying mobile first, and that's absolutely the case. But there is a small percentage of our population that relies on shared access to the internet. So think libraries or friendship centers. And so when we're designing our solution, we need to think with these people in mind, and that means enhanced privacy and enhanced security so that they can trust using a shared device. So that goes to show you that digital ID really was more than just technology, and had a lot of complex considerations. We're not done yet, has a lot of complex considerations. So how do we address that with the operations path that we had going for us? Everybody focused in on operations. Thankfully, our leadership saw the wisdom of separating out a dedicated unit to that strategic facing work. And so I was pulled out of the operations space and put onto this project, and we hired Ola to join us as well. And we are fully dedicated to this digital identity work. And you can see it's quite complex. So when we talk about those complexities, not just technology, we have legislative privacy and security frameworks. We have stakeholder engagement that Ola is going to speak about. We have technical requirements. We have measurement and evaluation. So there's big promises with digital ID, right? There's promises that it's going to improve the GDP, that it's going to reduce fraud, that it's going to make it easier and faster for citizens to access government services and hopefully private sector services. So we better make sure we're actually delivering on those promises, and proper measurement and evaluation framework will help us do that. And then, of course, there's the procurement process. Digital identity is working in a space where our technology standards are still emerging. The technology itself is still emerging. And so we're not in a mature procurement cycle where we can just buy something off the shelf that's demoed. We need to test it, and we need to know that we're working with a vendor that's in it for the long haul and is willing to evolve as we evolve. And then, of course, there's the actual designing the thing, building the thing, launching it, rolling it out, and supporting it, which is one small hexagon, but it's a massive piece of work all on its own. with all this in context and knowing now that we've got these two people focused in, where are we trying to go with digital ID? We envision a digital ID that we will start small and will be used with Saskatchewan government services first, but the end result is huge. We want to expand that digital ID to be used with other provinces, with the federal government, with crown corporations, and eventually in the private sector and even internationally. If you think about how we use a driver's license for photo ID today, you can use your driver's license in multiple jurisdictions. Same concept with the digital ID. So by the end of this, we should be able to use our digital IDs across Canada with provinces issuing digital IDs to do things like sign a mortgage, register for classes, rent an apartment, buy alcohol, etc. We should be able to use it with the same ease that we use a physical ID. And so now I want to turn it over to Ola, who's going to take you through the stakeholder engagement findings that we've done and what that's taught us about how we need to put citizens at the center of our design.
Thank you, Cosanna. Now that Cosanna has told us about what digital ID is, what it is used for, where we are, where we want to go to, let me bring you on into our engagement overview. Over the past year and a half, we've done two main engagements. We engaged with the industry last year, where we used town hall, one-on-one sessions to understand what options are out there for us as regards this project and how to structure our procurement. And we also engaged the public, where we had survey and two town hall meetings and one-on-one sessions with various members of the population. We used a representative sample of the province with 802 respondents for the survey. And when we realized that we might not be able to target marginalized population with this survey, we decided to do a one-on-one so that we can get feedback from organizations that represent this set of members of our population listed on the screen. For the industry findings, our findings shows that digital ID is more than technology. It's a full program of activities, especially when it comes to service. And the feedback we got from the industry was that we're going to need support to develop the whole program of activities that we're considering in the implementation of this initiative. We realized that we are going to need a consortium of vendors to partner with in achieving our objectives down this lane. And we're not just going to go with vendors that are very competent in technical solutions. We want vendors that will be able to help support in other areas of our scope of the project. We recognize that we have some existing capabilities, and we are going to look at vendors that will be able to help leverage on those capabilities, like the facial verification with our motor vehicle licensing agency in Saskatchewan, and also our identity and access management single sign-on from our existing Platform Saskatchewan account. The high-level findings from the public stakeholder engagement shows that support for digital identity is quite high. We have 75% that are supportive of the idea, and while we have 54% interested in learning more about it. And that's informed us that there's need for more information out there, and because just 45%, we're really familiar with the concept of digital identity. We know that we're not going to underestimate the concerns about security, and our findings show that 75% we're concerned about privacy breaches and information sharing, and we know that we have to put privacy and security as the core of this initiative. Diversity consideration, which is the last point on this screen, shows that there is need for access to computers by our indigenous population, and that there needs to be comfort for people living with disability, especially people with visual impairment, so that they can be able to have access to computers or devices that are camera enabled to validate their identities. The positive side of this finding is that recent immigrants, people that are new to Canada, showed a lot of interest and enthusiasm about using this digital identity when it's launched. The key takeaways from the findings, as you can see on the screen, internet connectivity remains a huge challenge, and this is predominant amongst people living in rural areas and people with lower level of income. Another key takeaway from the engagement is digital literacy, where the most prominent gaps were amongst seniors, newcomers, people in rural areas, people with lower education, like I said before, and people at the intersection of mental illness and homelessness with addictions. The primary concerns in here was we know that there were a lot of concerns raised by people that did have English as their first language, and we know that we needed to ensure that the solution was going to have a user-friendly interface, and we also had feedback that there's need to put people that might have cognitive disabilities that will need assistance to complete tasks when they go online for digital services. Our findings shows that mobile devices is the most preferable amongst the population in Saskatchewan. 84% will prefer to use their mobile phones to access digital services, while 63% too will rather use their personal computers in their homes or in their offices. But we knew that we needed to pay attention to a critical part of the population, which is the 2% of people that would rather want to use shared library or friendship centers to access digital services because they don't have access to personal digital devices. For accessibility, our findings shows that there are a range of accessibility considerations that we need to address. Part of it is visual impairments when it comes to people with disabilities. Concerns were raised about the ability to be able to complete the processes in this concept of digital identity. We also found out that people with low income have challenges when it comes to procuring the physical IDs, which is the foundation for getting onto digital ID. And there are concerns raised about the cost of replacement with people that have struggling with homelessness and cognitive disability. We also had considerations and concerns for people, a gender diverse part of our population who were concerned about facial verification as regards when they have when they're transitioning in their journey to on the gender diverse part of the population. Keeping trust building at the forefront of our initiative is critical, and we know that privacy concerns were huge when we had this stakeholder engagement with people, and it's part of our requirements that we're going to ensure that there's adequate education on privacy measures to increase trust amongst the population to drive adoption. Now I will switch it back to Cosanna to take us on the remaining part of the presentation.
Thanks, Ola. So with those findings in mind, and bearing in mind that research was done strictly for digital identity, but I hope we can start to see pretty quickly how those findings show us what we need to be focusing on for digital service design in general, and as we move forward collectively on our government journeys. And so the first one, of course, is consider usability by all citizens. So user experience out of the gate doesn't necessarily consider all citizens. It might consider the people who are easiest to recruit, right? Recruitment is hard. Let's not kid ourselves. When we're doing user experience design, that's one of the hardest steps. But we need to be thinking about all citizens. And this cartoon is one of my favorites. And so, of course, the custodian is here shoveling the steps, and that's a fairly natural thing. Most people use the steps. I'm going to shovel the path that most people use so that most people can get into the school quickly. But of course, as the cartoon points out, if he shoveled the ramp first, all people could get up that ramp, presumably, not just the people who can use the steps. And so what I urge us to look for when we're designing is where can we design with ramps first, right? Where can we prioritize the ramps and only worry about side accommodations when we absolutely need to. The next one really goes without saying at this point is internet connectivity. The big promise, or one of the big promises of digital identity, but also digital service delivery in general, is that we can reach our rural and remote populations. And in Saskatchewan, like in much of Canada, we have places that are only accessible by float plane, that are only accessible by ice roads, that maybe have government service access in their town, maybe on a rotation of a few months, maybe never. And they may have to travel 4, 5, 6, 8 hours south to be able to get access. So we need to really prioritize that internet connectivity so that we can prioritize digital inclusion. A third key thing to take away from these findings is the importance of strong engagement. Yes, the upfront engagement that we've done, but we will also continue to do that engagement throughout our design process and as we get ready to launch. And that does two things. Number one, it ensures that we are designing with the needs of our population in mind. And number two, we're building a rapport with the population as we go. So when we get to launch, this isn't a brand new thing that people have a ton of questions about. There will absolutely be questions. There will be people who have never heard about this before. The intention is not to reach every person before we launch, but the intention is to have enough organizations be consulted, enough people be consulted, that when this does launch, they're equally prepared. So think about libraries that Ola and I have both spoken about. Libraries will know this is coming, and libraries will have been able to put up their hand and say, hey, if you guys are launching this, we need these supports in advance. And we're able to work with them through strong engagement to drive that uptake because we've supported the libraries, we've supported the friendship centers, we've supported the band offices, we've supported the homeless shelters, etc., the open door societies, which are settlement organizations, to help people get connected with the digital identity and be on their way to access government services and hopefully private sector services down the line. To do that, we have to have trust. It is not good enough to have people in the right spots, ready and willing to help citizens. They need to trust our service, and so do the actual citizens using the service. And that requires citizen-centric privacy and security. That has to be at the foundation of everything that we're doing, not just digital identity, but especially digital identity. And so that means capturing as little data as possible, data minimization, but it also means that we are actively working to protect and secure the data that we do capture. And then we need to look at our digital ecosystem as a whole. So let's think about sort of the top standard of user experience. If we think about Amazon, often we'll always compare government service. Poor government services with far less budgets than Amazon will be held up to the Amazon standard and said, we need to make it as easy as Amazon. But let's face it too, if you are brand new to Amazon, it is very simple, but you still have to learn how to use it. And how do you learn how to use it, or Facebook, or any other regularly visited website? It's through reoccurring visits, right? And each time you're there, you learn a little bit new functionality. We don't have that same opportunity with government services. You might deal with a government service once a year, once every 5 years. And so what we do need to capitalize on is that we have a vast number of government services. And so if every government service works the same, more or less, then we're learning across our experiences instead of repeat visits to one experience. But that also works for trust and poor experience. And so if one government service doesn't behave properly, if there's a breach with one government service, if there's a breakdown with one government service, that negatively impacts, through perception, all of our other government services. So building out the whole ecosystem matters, building it out in a user-friendly, consistent way matters. And we need to remember that the weakest link in that chain is going to impact the trust and the usage of all of our other services. Which leads us to digital by default, but not digital only. There will always be people in our communities who cannot or will not use digital, and we need to design for them as well. And so the airport flow is what I like to think about. If you're like me, you check in 24 hours in advance on your phone. But sometimes if you're traveling internationally or you have peculiar circumstance and luggage or something like that, you can't quite complete that transaction on the phone. And so you say, okay, no problem. I'll wait until I go in to catch my flight and I'll use the kiosk. And again, if you're like me, you'll probably use that kiosk by yourself and be on your way. But sometimes you'll run into a struggle. Maybe your passport's just been too beat up and the machine's not reading it anymore. Maybe, again, you have a weird luggage situation. Maybe you're just not very good at using that kiosk and you find it really overwhelming. You don't read English as a first language. It's not in your language and it's a struggle for you. You still have this person here ready to help you. And at the end of the day, this person can take you over to one of these kiosks over here and actually complete the transaction for you. But having those steps plays a major role in developing that digital literacy that Ola was talking about. So maybe the first time, I just want to go straight to this far back counter and somebody will meet me there. But they'll probably actually push me to the kiosk and they'll say, hold on, you can actually do this, but I'll help you. I'll guide you through it. And what does that do? It builds your confidence and your literacy skills. So somebody works with you to use the kiosk the first time. The next time you come back, hey, you can use the kiosk yourself. The next time, maybe you give your phone a go and you don't actually wait till you get to the kiosk. And little by little, we empower our citizens to use and be more comfortable with digital. And so this is a real key role that we as government have as we're moving into this digital economy, is how are we building up the confidence and the capabilities of our citizens online. So digital by default, but not and never digital only. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I want to take us back to that operations conversation we were having, operations versus strategy. And that's not to say that there's not strategy in operations, there absolutely is. But it's how are we dealing with the here and now, and how are we planning for the future? And those two things need to be separate. We need to take the time and dedicate the personnel to that future piece. If everybody is working in operations, we will constantly be pulled in for the fire, right? There's always something happening in operations. Somebody needs extra support. We're having a bug with this system. We have a backlog we need to get through. And so even if you have 15 or 20 hours in your week that are dedicated to future-facing stuff, the chances of that getting eaten up by operations, or the chances of that being half an hour or 1 hour segments spread across your week where you can't actually get in to do the deep thinking, is extremely high. So user-centered design, mission critical in operations, mission critical in strategy. But when we're looking at that future-focused stuff, it's really important that we separate out the team and give them the space to work. And so with that, I want to thank you very much for your time, and we'll turn it over to a discussion.
Thank you, Cosanna and Ola. Truly, it was so interesting, to hear about Saskatchewan's digital identity journey, but more broadly, a journey to building services and service design principles, embedding it throughout the process. And it was really interesting to hear about the spectrum of services and how you started with over 70 websites and evolved to more sensitive digital services which are supported by digital ID, or enabling the conditions for digital ID, and the complexity that's involved in just drafting digital identity strategies, from governance, stakeholder engagement, design, procurement, legislation. It really is something that every region is thinking about. And so it was just really interesting to kind of gain your perspective on the evolution of this work. And like all of our other sessions, there's going to be a live Q&A. So Cosanna and Ola will be joining us right after we wrap this Regional Digital Government Summit to chat more in depth about some of the topics that were touched upon. And afterwards, we are also going to have a live cocktail hour. So please follow your program. There's a link to join us at the cocktail hour that will follow the Q&A with Cosanna and Ola. We're going to dive into themes that you can join into that continue the conversation, whether it be regional communities, what's happening in your part of the world, how are you building and sustaining conversations, design systems, are you using them, how do you support them? You have a topic in mind, we want to enable the conversation around it.
But before we wrap up, we want to take a second to thank everyone for tuning in and for participating. It's been a fantastic day of really great content, and we have teams that have represented us from around the world. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the team in Georgia, Eric and Nikhil. Thank you to the team in California, Clara and Krista. And of course, the team from Saskatchewan, Ola and Cosanna. Of course, we want to give a huge thanks to the Forward 50 organizing team. We could not be here without you. Thank you for giving us this platform and the space to be able to share the great work that our regions are actively working on. Special shout out, obviously, to our content track queen, Rebecca, and our supporting cast, Daria and Alex. And of course, again, thank you for participating today, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you at the Q&A and at the happy hour later today.
And we look forward to seeing you all online tomorrow. Forward 50 content kicks off at 9 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time to kick off day 2. So with that,
thank you, everyone, and until we meet again.
Ačiū visiems ir iki pasimatymo.
Gracias a todos.
Merci à tout le monde et à bientôt.